Great. Well, thank you all for joining us. This is the second Transit Caucus briefing of the 2026 legislative session. We're really excited to focus today on transit in the Baltimore region. We have John Luria from the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission, Robin Budish from Transit Choices, and Brian O'Malley from the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance. This conversation is being recorded, so we have some of our Transit Caucus members here today, and then we'll be distributing it to all of our Transit Caucus members in the hopes that they and their staff will introducing and starting the briefing itself. I did want to kick it over to Delegate Fair to just give us a quick update on where we are with our legislative endorsement process.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello, everybody. Thanks so much for being on the call today. Our legislative endorsement process, we've received and closed the application process. We have evaluated all of the bills. We've made our recommendations to the Transit Caucus, so each of our members should have received an email with a voting form for each of the bills the Transit Caucus is considering endorsement. We're closing that process tomorrow, Tuesday, and shortly thereafter, we will have our full endorsement probably released Wednesday or Thursday of this week. So, Madam Chair, I think we're in good shape for a lot of really good bills that we're considering this year. And at that point, the Transit Caucus will then release its priorities for the 2026 legislative session. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Fair, for coordinating that process. So we will get started on our agenda presentations. What we'll do, I think, is we'll have all three presenters speak, and then we'll take questions after, as some of the questions people may have might get answered with subsequent presentations. So we'll start with John from the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I brought my 1970 era bus behind me, so make sure newly air conditioned. So thanks so much. This is obviously very friendly territory for transit advocates, and I appreciate so much the work that this caucus does, your longstanding and really continued advocacy. I was just hoping this morning to spend a few minutes talk about the background and scope of the commission and update you on our work. We had a chance to do something similar last year. Appreciated it very much. The BRTC was created in 2023. It began its work in 2024. It's a public body. It's a creature of statute. But I'm a private citizen. I'm a lawyer in Baltimore with seems like ever-growing transit expertise. But our members include appointees of the governor, of the mayor, of the county executives from the Baltimore, Anne Arundel, Howard counties. The membership includes transit riders, employers, industry experts, local government representatives, and so on. And a main purpose of the commission was to get more local voices into MTA decision making, since, as of course you know, MTA is a mode of MDOT and part of the kind of the family of MDOT modes. And MDOT has essentially historically had sole control over MTA. That's good in some ways and bad in others. Another main responsibility is to advocate for broadly for the region's public transit system maintained by MTA. That means all the local modes and as well as MARC. And we have other statutory obligations, including some things that were really topical this year: reviewing and approving the Central Maryland Regional Transit Plans, just updated several months ago. The new capital needs inventory, just updated several months ago. Looking at service change proposals, the MTA's annual attainment report, and other things which are all called out by statute. And the commission is also charged with reviewing and MTA's operating and capital budget requests, and I'll come back to that later in a few moments. So we are advocates for MTA, I think. But we're not MTA. And I guess the way that what helps me to think about our role, especially when I talk to legislators, is that we're sort of like eyes and ears in the field for you. I mean, you're out there doing all the things that you're doing, including looking at transit systems. But I think of us as sort of helping to examine, diagnose, and report back to you on what the system is, how the system is doing, what the system needs, keeping you apprised, making assessments, making recommendations. So to that end, we have several work groups. We have a staffing work group, which did a lot of looking at how the MTA staffs. You'll be maybe interested to know it's actually quite efficient. In fact, it's way understaffed for what it manages to get done. Compensation gaps remain an issue. It's a hard thing to talk about now because of the state's budget situation, but MTA has a high-performing work group on locally operated transit system lots, which has been working to coordinate transit among 5 locally operated transit systems. The fifth is the city of Annapolis. We have a project and program delivery group, which is reviewing and identifying factors that inhibit project delivery, including, for example, the state's procurement system, which has an impact on lots of things, but it certainly has an impact on what MTA is able to do in terms of its work. We have a rider experience work group that's focused on, as you would imagine, the experience of all of MTA's riders. MTA actually has a terrific rider experience unit. But we have spent a lot of our time this year talking about the crisis that's been identified in Baltimore City regarding getting kids to schools. I know not all of you are Baltimore City elected officials, but I'm sure everybody is aware of and sympathetic to this challenge that we have of getting Baltimore City school kids to schools. The city doesn't have a yellow bus system, as a lot of other folks do. So we've actually begun working with the state, with the school system and the city of Baltimore and MTA on that. And then we're adding in some TOD work. There's a bill as Vice Chair Charkoudian's committee is hearing the TOD bill. I think this week, I think on Thursday, a governor's bill, and we're very, very focused on trying to help with all the many opportunities in the state, underutilized development opportunities around transit. But I wanted to highlight for you this morning a couple of immediate priorities, which are mostly about the budget these days, and especially about the capital budget. Some of you toured with us the traction power substations at the main light rail yard in Baltimore last year and saw the deteriorated condition they were in. We were all very surprised to hear that the loss of the wrong one could take down the entire system and/or the entire route to the airport. I mean, there are a lot of bad stories and risks. Many of the light rail fleet is simply not in service, literally not in service, and no new cars have been purchased since the origin of service in the 1990s. That's pretty daunting. But with many others, including certainly this caucus, we rang the alarm bells last year, and the legislature and the governor identified and enacted significant amounts of revenue, especially for state of good repair. And that is making a real difference, including a commitment to modernize the entire light rail fleet that is now underway. It's a giant commitment. Of course, those revenues take a while to implement. Unfortunately, there is no light rail car showroom where you get to just go and buy a few and have them delivered. It takes a long time to get them online. And one of the problems we've had, of course, is deferred maintenance, lack of investment, and so on. And despite new funding, the capital needs inventory shows growing backlogs in maintenance. We wrote to the MDOT secretary in November when the draft CTP was released, and we said, without a robust CTP, we risk having a set of ambitious plans that are unfunded and therefore unimplemented. We called that a plans versus funding gap, and we said that it was particularly acute when we have a set of recent plans that, if funded, would propel the system forward. And those are the things I just mentioned: the capital needs inventory, the Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan, the MARC Growth and Transformation Plan, and I'll come back to this for a moment, as will others, the Be More Bus Implementation Plan. We said that taken together, these initiatives present a tremendous opportunity to transform transit in Central Maryland, but only if the CTP provides the resources necessary to realize them. We cited the Light Rail Modernization Program as an example of how it could work when it works, but it doesn't necessarily work often enough. We obviously are very concerned about the future of the Red Line, a problem for which there's no clear solution at this point, but something that is super important to the Baltimore region, and trying to determine, along with many others, how that's supposed to come to fruition. But perhaps more immediately and more at the moment, and you'll hear this, I think, from Brian and Robin, we're very focused on MTA's Be More Bus Plan. The Be More Bus Plan is a long-awaited and much-needed plan to improve core bus service for MTA's riders. 80% of MTA's riders are bus riders, and we view the Be More Bus Plan as a high ROI, return on investment opportunity for the state because the impact it would have on the number of riders that it would affect. We unanimously endorsed the plan in September, but the draft CTP and you probably have heard this, allocates a very small amount of the funds that are necessary to implement the plan. I think it's about $14 million, and they're tagged for beginning acquisition process for a site for the 5th Bus Division, which is considered to be a linchpin step in implementing Be More Bus. So we have asked the MDOT and asking everybody, including your budget committee peers, to help fund Be More Bus as quickly as possible to try and advance the ball on it as quickly as possible. At the budget hearing, I think the Be More Bus comes up about more than any other immediate issue. And finally, I just want to call attention to the MTA Reform Act, HB 1081. I saw Delegate Corman on here, or at least I saw his name. This is Delegate Corman's and Delegate Edelson's bill. In the Senate, it's Senator McCrae's bill. This came from recommendations of a work group that you created last session. The House hearing on that bill delegate, the Senate hearing is in early March. As you probably know, this would, and this could easily be a whole separate presentation, but the bill would create a board of directors for Baltimore Core Transit Service and a separate commuter services advisory board for commuter rail and bus, including MARC. The Core Transit Board would replace the BRTC that I chair, but it would have more authority, especially with regard to budget. I teased a little bit earlier about budget and our role with regard to budget. If you go back and look at the original bill that created the commission, it actually said approve the budget. And one of the relatively few changes in that bill from the time it was introduced to the time it was passed deleted the word approved and substituted the word reviewed. And you can imagine the consequence of that. It's no small consequence. I think the work that the work group did over the last year indicated that there just needed to be an independent entity that had greater authority over MTA's budget, that had created not just an advisory role, but a more significant role. There are practical limitations. We're not talking about, at the moment, a true regional transit authority. We're not talking about revenue raising authority. The work group concluded that was probably just too much too soon at this point and where the state is. And of course, at the moment, the funding all comes, as you know, from the TTF. So it's hard to create something that has full authority over a piece of an agency, which is a piece of a giant MDOT entity. But it is a big step in the right direction, as proposed by the bill, to give the board and to give local governments and other representatives more input, more authority over MTA's budget, and an opportunity to really be part of that and to balance out the MDOT kind of sole authority that exists. So that is forthcoming. We are very supportive of it. Look forward. I'll be testifying on it, I think, on Thursday in that committee. So I think I'll stop there, Delegate. I'm just trying to give in and look forward to any questions you might have after both Brian and Robin have a chance to talk. And thank you very, very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. We appreciate it. We'll hold questions until the end, but we'll go now to Robin Budish from Transit Choices. Thank you, Robin, for joining us and for all your work year-round. Robin, you're still muted.
Yep. Thank you, Delegate Charkoudian, for this wonderful opportunity. And we appreciate the hard work that you're doing, and your colleagues to move the transportation agenda forward. I'm going to share what Transit Choices has been doing and what we continue to be doing, along with Transit Choices co-founder Jimmy Rouse, who is joining us today. So what I would like to do is to say again, good morning. My name is Robin Budish. I am the director of Transit Choices. We are a nonprofit transit advocacy organization. And for over a decade, really, our day-to-day work includes trying to create a first-rate multimodal transit system for the Baltimore region. Because in essence, we believe a strong regional transit system is really fundamental to fostering economic growth and long-term competitiveness. As John so appropriately mentioned, the Be More Bus program is something that Transit Choices endorses fully in terms of bringing the project to fruition. And we know that it is a very expensive project, but in terms of, sort of the return on investment, we think it's something that really needs to be not only looked at, but really needs to be fully implemented in terms of really reorganizing and prioritizing our bus system. So I'm sure many of you know that the CTP represents Maryland's largest ever transportation investment, 22.1 billion over a 6-year period. But the issue for us is that it doesn't adequately prioritize transit in the Baltimore region, in particular, the Be More Bus Plan. We believe that public transit, it's more than just infrastructure. It's essential for access to jobs, schools, and healthcare. It reduces traffic congestion and emissions. It ensures mobility for all residents. And if we think about underinvestment, it has real impacts. Students absolutely struggle to get to school. Workers cannot access large parts of the job market, and employers face challenges both recruiting and retaining staff. We feel strongly that the Be More Bus Plan would address these challenges directly. Maryland has the financial capacity to implement the plan within a 6-year period. Yet this year's CTP decreases funding for transit while highway funding grows. This is a pattern that's persisted for really over 30 years. In essence, what we're doing this legislative session is to urge the General Assembly to really work closely with Governor Moore and MDOT to absolutely reallocate the resources necessary and fully fund the Be More Bus Plan. And the reason that we believe so strongly in that is, Baltimoreans can finally benefit from a modern, expanded transit system. And just to touch on a couple of more specifics regarding the Be More Bus Plan, this is a comprehensive proposal to deliver faster, more frequent, and more reliable bus service. This is something that at Transit Choices, we hear all of the time from our transit constituents. It's a problem. It would increase bus service by 36%. It would add over 200 buses to the fleet. And really most importantly, because as John mentioned, it is the linchpin of the plan, to build a 5th bus division to to maintain this expanded fleet. Yet the current CTP provides only limited funding, really in essence, meaning that this transformative plan cannot be fully implemented. So we're going to continue to testify, both written and oral on the importance of this program. And, we feel optimistic, because there is so much advocacy around this particular plan that, we will see some progress moving forward. So thank you for your time. I would like to now turn this over to Transit Choices co-founder, Jimmy Rouse.
Right. Mr. Rouse, please.
Yeah. So we're Transit Choices is strong supporters of the House Bill 1081 that John mentioned. And that's for 2 reasons. A core commission would be the first step towards creating a regional transit, not authority, but commission. And that would enable us to do something that WMATA has been doing for years, which is to organize politicians, advocates, and businesses together in the CTP process to lobby for funding for the Baltimore region, which we've never been able to do because the MTA is a state agency and it runs the Baltimore transit system. So they can't lobby their own boss for more money for Baltimore. We need a separate entity, and the 1081 will create that entity. And in the future, that is going to be the step towards creating a regional transit funding stream for the Baltimore region. It's a first-rate train, a regional source of funding for that, a dedicated source of funding for that purpose, which would mean involving Baltimore City and the surrounding counties in that effort to create that dedicated resource. One point I'd like to make that I don't hear being made enough, and that is, excuse me, I lost it. Hold on for a minute.
Take your time.
Where am I? I'll be there in just a second.
Well,
the point I want to make is that it's actually cheaper to create a regional transit system for Baltimore than it is to maintain the status quo. That sounds not true, but it is in fact true, because Baltimore should be an economic engine for the state. It should be drawing investment, raising the overall tax base for the state. But Baltimore is held back by the level of crime and poverty in the city. And that has the effect of depressing the businesses, because people are hesitant to come into the city to work, play, go to restaurants, go to events, because the crime discourages them. Therefore, we don't draw the investment into Baltimore that we could. Crime is holding us back. Let's see how I can put this. The best thing we could do by creating a transit system would be to connect people to jobs, to connect people to educational opportunities. This would help eliminate poverty in the city. It's costly to maintain poverty. There's the cost of a welfare system, from the care, welfare, hunger. Those issues all cost money. By attacking poverty in the city, we could reduce that cost. And the present prison system, 30% of the people come from Baltimore, which only has 10% of the state's population. By reducing poverty in the city, we would reduce crime in the city, and we reduce the cost that is. Presently, it's the state is spending $300 million a year on people from Baltimore City in the prison system. So we could reduce that. All these things would add up to creating making Baltimore the economic engine it should be for the state. So I think that's a really important point that we emphasize as we go forward. I'll turn it back to you, Robin.
Thank you, Jimmy. I think, what we wanted to focus on today was our advocacy and full support of the implementation of the Be More Bus plan, in addition to, the bills with respect to plans for the MTA reorganization. So thank you for your time, and we're more than happy to answer any questions or to hear your comments at the conclusion of all the presentations.
thank you, Robin. Thank you, James. We're going to move next to Brian O'Malley. And you have there you go.
Can you see my title slide there?
You got it.
Great, thank you. So thanks so much for your time and attention and for all the work that the members of the Transit Caucus do to advance the cause of improving public transportation as an option for Marylanders. Um, I had a chance to speak to you last year, and I'm grateful to be back with you this year's briefing. Today, I want to highlight five things, and I'll begin by just highlighting, speaking on behalf of the students that are stakeholders in the Baltimore region's transit system. And then, second, I'll speak on behalf of the workers who rely on the transit system. And then I want to address an excellent question that came up during the Senate MTA budget hearing on Thursday. Um, and then close by saying a little bit about the Be More Bus plan that John and Robin and Jimmy have already touched on, and then close with some solutions that we're looking at. So first, the students. I feel always an obligation as an advocate to keep in mind the stakeholders and speak on their behalf. And the 25,000 or so students who are Baltimore City Public Schools students in middle school or high school are a big part of the stakeholder community. Um, Last year, I highlighted three reports from 2012 up through 2025 that speak to the challenges that students in Baltimore face relying on MTA to get to and from school. So I won't repeat those, but I do remind you that they're there. And the most recent one there is the Baltimore Banner's coverage during 2025 in a series of articles that talked about the challenges that kids face. I'll just add that there's a group of Baltimore City school students who are doing advocacy this year. Several of them spoke during the Transit Riders Rally in Lawyers Mall on February 2nd. They've appeared on WYPR on the radio, and several of them were planning to come today to testify at the MTA budget hearing in the House. Unfortunately, due to the snow, we canceled the rented bus that was going to bring them. But one of those is Ms. Shake gave me permission to quote from her prepared testimony. She's an eighth grader, a middle school student who got permission from her principal to take the day off to come to Annapolis to ask the legislature to help improve transportation that she and her peers rely on. And she said students wake up hours early and still arrive late because buses are delayed. Some leave school early to catch a bus, missing instructional time. And we've also heard from principals that they often schedule classes during first period that are more expendable because they know a significant portion of kids will consistently arrive late for first period, so they don't put like a math class during first period. And that's the cart driving the horse for a principal whose job is to educate kids. They're literally scheduling around the unreliability of the transportation. Um, Last year, I told you that the average worker in the Baltimore region can only get to 8.5% of the region's jobs within 60 minutes or less by public transportation. That number has continued to get worse. It's now 7.5%, a tiny fraction of the region's jobs. So, sort of by definition, a metropolitan region is a commute shed. It's a place you can get to 100% of the jobs in an hour or less by car. It's defined by commuting patterns focused on drivers. But for public transportation, if you don't have access to a car for every worker in your household, which is the case for many households in the Baltimore region, the universe of job opportunities shrinks by more than tenfold, and it keeps getting smaller. This is from the transportation report card that my organization, the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance, updates every couple of years. And in the 10 years we've been doing it, that percentage keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. That's why, like the Gerald Grimes, who for years ran the Mayor's Office of Employment Development at Mondawmin in Baltimore City, said that he trains his staff to ask a question when someone walks in the door for help finding a job. And it's not, do you have a GED or what skills you have? It's, do you have access to a car? Because there's no point in having certain conversations if they don't. There again, it's the cart driving the horse. We shouldn't be shaping our economy and economic opportunity by the failures of the public transportation system. So that brings me to the question that Senator Rosapep asked during last week's MTA budget hearing on the Senate side. He asked, why has WMATA in the Washington area recovered roughly all of its pre-pandemic ridership, but MTA has only recovered about 75%? I want to take a crack at answering that. That question was posed to the MTA administrator, Holly Arnold, but as an advocate who watches both and rides both systems regularly, I can tell you that the service is better in the Washington region than it is in the Baltimore region. And that's backed up by data. Um, People in the Washington urbanized area experience about 25% more transit service than people in the Baltimore urbanized area per capita. That's based on vehicles operating in maximum service per capita from the National Transit Database. 25% more, that's significantly more service. That means the bus or the train comes more, comes quicker when you're waiting at the stop. Vehicle revenue miles. That's how many miles in revenue service, so not deadheading, but actually picking up passengers, the trains and buses travel. And over the last 10 years, on the left, you see the MTA major systems, metro, subway, light rail, and bus. And while bus has stayed relatively flat, there have been significant declines in the vehicle revenue miles on the train systems, whereas there's been significant increase on the right in the WMATA system, the metro rail, and bus has also stayed relatively flat. It's also breakdowns, which affects the reliability. On the top, you can see the last 10 years of breakdown rates per 100,000 revenue miles for buses and trains in the DC region versus the chaos in the bottom chart is what riders are dealing with. And I expect that to get better. There's a big win in the Consolidated Transportation Plan last year, thanks to the legislature, thanks to the BRTC and John's work, thanks to the advocates like Robin and Jimmy, and thanks to the governor. We are investing a lot more in state of good repair needs, but this chaos is what you get when you neglect that for years. And so the best time to have invested more was 10 years ago. We can't go back in time, so you did the next best thing, which was invest in it now. And we're finally taking care of the state of good repair needs. But this is what we're talking about when we say we can't let the backlog of state of good repair needs get bigger and bigger. We're finally going to make it smaller. And expansions. This slide shows the recent expansions of all the major transportation systems under MDOT. We're expanding them all. At the bottom, you can see WMATA expansions, including infill station at Potomac Yard, Silver Line extension, Purple Line construction. And in the Baltimore region, we haven't expanded the core service transit system since the late 1990s. My colleague Eric was in middle school and remembers when they came to present on it. He now has kids in middle school, and we're still waiting for expansion in the Baltimore region. This chart shows investment. You can see the blue bar this is from the Department of Legislative Services. The blue bar represents the funding in the 2025 CTP, and then the reddish orangish bar represents the funding in the 2026 CTP. And you can see that for State Highway Administration, more than $1 billion increase in funding. MTA was relatively flat, WMATA was relatively flat. So you raised more money for MDOT and they poured it into widening highways and didn't invest more in public transportation. Another thing I want to flag here, I challenge us all to guess, just in our minds, we don't have to say it out loud, but what percent of this MTA bar is investment in the Baltimore core service area, the transit that serves the Baltimore region? It's 43%, less than half. This slide reminds us that more than half goes to the Purple Line, MARC, lots and agency-wide system-wide stuff. So only 43% of that is actually invested in the systems in the Baltimore region. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the Be More Bus plan because others have spoken to it, but I just want to point out to you because some people get overwhelmed by what exactly is it. It's a transit agency doing its job. It's telling you how they could run better bus service if we invest more in them. Faster travel times, more frequent service, more reliable service. That's the plan, and it's not funded yet, but we could fund it. They get there by increasing trips per weekday by 21%, 20 or 46% more trips per weekend, 48% more trips overnight, but also just greater investment in the system so that the runs that are already scheduled actually run, whereas now we see a lot that don't. The last thing I'll say about this is that Trade Point Atlantic, when jobs started coming back online there, it was mothballed when the um, steel mills closed, and then Trade Point Atlantic started, and they started bringing jobs back in Baltimore County, and they no longer had MTA service. And so MTA added service and the ridership grew really fast. So there was pressure to run the more bus service there. And they added the 163, which is an express bus that connects people from certain neighborhoods to the jobs at Trade Point Atlantic. But they were only able to do that by taking service off of Eastern Avenue. They don't have the capacity to add service when new jobs are coming online. They have to take away from somewhere to add somewhere else. And that's because their four existing bus divisions are absolutely at capacity. They don't have room for anything more. And so part of the Be More Bus plan is to build a fifth bus division and give them that capacity to respond and connect people to jobs. I'll close by just saying the solutions that the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance is advocating for. Keep funding state of good repair. Thank you again. It's hugely important. Um, and then the ask is fund Be More Bus. The current CTP has 14 million. That's only about 2% of the cost. That puts us on a 50-year timeline to implement it. Fund it with urgency. Let's implement this in 5 years. Maybe we spend 10 years figuring out how to build the red line, but we should be able to improve the buses in the near term, so kids like Isma can get to school. And then three bills that we're supporting. These first two, Transportation and Climate Alignment Act and Transportation Investment Priorities Act, have to do with reforming the spending side of the ledger. We could be a lot more careful and a lot more deliberate with how MDOT spends. Right now, we give them lots of money and then they, do it without a lot of accountability to goals. And then we wonder why access to jobs keeps getting worse and traffic keeps getting worse and emissions keep getting worse, despite your um, targets put into law about greenhouse gas emission reductions. So we need to pass these bills. And then transit-oriented development, there's a great program at MDOT supporting more TOD, but also there's legislation, and I would encourage you to support that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. While people are preparing their questions, I'll just mention the Transit Caucus has taken on the over the interim, we take field trips. And one of the field trips we did take this year was to Baltimore to really look at the experience of students riding the buses. And so we joined students during time of dismissal and we took the bus with them and we had a chance to speak to the students and the staff and folks from MTA about that experience, about the challenges and about what it would take to really get it where it needs to go. So I think that was really helpful for all the legislators. We continue to really encourage legislators from across the entire state to really care about and advocate for transit across the entire state. And we did have members from parts of the state other than Baltimore riding the bus with those students. So we were pleased to see that, and we will continue to encourage, again, across the state, all of us should be caring about transit everywhere. So with that, I was going to take a question from Delegate Fair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for your presentations. Apologies, I'm on the road headed into Annapolis, so it's been interesting to listen to the robust conversation. But Mr. Laria, I wanted to your comments about the light rail system. I was part of the team that came out and toured that in Baltimore last year. Really enjoyed the presentation, understanding the complexities and the challenges that MTA faces with that. You mentioned that we're just simply not investing enough to actually move the needle fast enough on this issue. My just very baseline question: A, how much more investment do you think is needed for us to move the needle quickly? And you mentioned an issue with procurement. Are there regulatory issues that are standing in the way? Is there red tape there that the legislature should be looking at cutting to try to move that issue along a little bit faster, understanding it's on borrowed time and that we're about a decade out from a decade to 15 years out from being able to actually move this project forward? Is there things we could be doing to move this project along a little bit faster?
To move, I'm sorry, the red line, what was the last one, Delegate?
The light rail, the
Oh,
challenges,
the light rail. I'm sorry, all light rail. Yeah.
all the challenges with light
Yeah.
rail that we're
Light rail.
seeing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I don't have a number for you. I just don't. I mean, there's a number out there. I would have to get MTA to sort of make sure I have the right number for you in terms of how much more investment. I mean, the money is in the CTP now for the light rail modernization program. I mean, fundamentally, it will replace all the rail cars. It will replace other aspects of the system. So you have funded it. Which sounds like, I mean, it's a big deal, except it should have been done a long time ago. So thank God we did it. And I enjoyed meeting you. We spent time together walking around the light rail yard, and there's no substitute for seeing it because, when we saw it, we were like, holy cow. So, um, the light rail side of it is in pretty good shape, except for any sort of expansion. I mean, it doesn't fund any expansion or any sort of enhancements. It just gets the system back to where the system works. As you've heard, I think from the administrator, for example, they can't run enough cars coming out of Camden Yards at the end of the game because they basically blow the fuse. For sort of my layperson's perspective, you can't link enough cars together. So we continue to have a system that people want to use, and then it fails them, and then we're surprised and they don't want to come back. So I don't. I mean, so the money, I wish it could be spent more quickly, but I recognize that the world of procurement, and I'll get to your other procurement, has nothing to do with the Red Line project, which the mode choice. There's been a choice made by the governor for light rail. Obviously, that has run into all sorts of problems with the federal government. So we have a lot of problem solving to do on the Red Line, which may or may not have been exactly what you were discussing. On procurement, I mean, I think, there's the procurement reform issue is better known to you all as legislators than it is to me across the board. It just affects MTA and it affects the acquisitions that it needs to make. MTA also has a particular sort of handicap in that it is subject actually to stricter constraints at the Board of Public Works for procurement in terms of what it needs to go to BPW for reasons that basically are inexplicable. So I don't know. One of the things that the Reform Act Bill 1081 is doing, among the things we've talked about, is actually to try and create some more parity and fairness for MTA in terms of its ability to procure and go through BPW approvals in a more efficient fashion. So that would be my response. But I'm happy to, Delegate, get you any more information you might need if that doesn't get you everything that you.
Yeah, now that we have the new committee, the GLEE committee, which I'm sitting on, and we're dealing with government procurement, I would be very interested to hear more if we can connect offline about how we can work together to address some of the deficiencies. Thank you, Madam.
Yes, and thank you,
Right,
Delegate.
thank you. Robin.
Thank you. We've all touched upon very briefly the Red Line project. And I just want to let everyone know that that project remains on our radar at a very high level. The reason that it needs so much attention is because, understanding the current, sort of fiscal transportation landscape as it relates to federal funding, the fact of the matter is that we have got to find solutions. There are people in East West Baltimore that have a really difficult time struggling to get to jobs, schools, healthcare, healthy food. And although we, certainly respect that the governor understands that this is an important issue, one of the things that we've done is to speak with key leadership, both within, sort of the governor's team, but also, at MDOT, in terms of, doing nothing is not a solution. Is there a possibility of implementing BRT, which is bus rapid transit? Is there a possibility of doing something as sort of a pilot or temporary program with the goal of implementing a truly sustainable system? But, the fact that we don't have federal funding and this isn't, sort of the right timing is understandable. But at Transit Choices, we're sort of keeping the heat on, if you will, in terms of we can't just sit around and do nothing for the next 2 years, 4 years, 10 years, because we hear from people all the time that they're really struggling to get. And I'm talking about the corridor between Security Boulevard, up to Bayview. So I just wanted to share that information with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that it's a really important context. And I think in a lot of areas, transit, clean energy, a bunch of different areas where it's just incumbent on the state not to step back because the federal government is stepping back, but actually to step up in new and different ways and to be as creative as we can in response to the federal government, abdicating its responsibilities to the people of the United States. Okay, so I don't see any other questions. Were there any other questions folks had going once? I want to thank you all. Oh, John, did you want to say something? I saw you just said. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us. I want to mention one other thing, which is that Holly Arnold, who's the administrator for MTA, was not able to join today. She'll actually be joining us next week, even though next week's briefing is on the DC area metro. So we have the Council of Governments from the DMV area and folks from WMATA, DMV Moves. But because Administrator Arnold couldn't join us today, she'll be joining us next week. So if folks have questions specifically for her, you'll have a chance to ask those in that context. So next week's briefing is at 1 o'clock on Monday. It's a little bit later. We have, as I said, we'll be talking primarily about with DMV Moves about WMATA and the DC region metro, but we will also have Holly. And so please make sure that you get there, get your staff there. And let me just thank our panelists one more time. Really appreciate you joining us today. And we'll keep working hard for, a strong and just transit system for the state of Maryland.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you
Thanks
for the
for all you do.
opportunity.
Thank you.